I have internet problems, so I ran down from my apartment and I didn't bring my drinks along, so
Oh,
I have to like go get coffee or something.
oh dear.
Hamid should be there.
Okay, where go?
We're on.
Okay. Good evening, everybody, and welcome this evening to Mezcal versus Pulque, a conversation about the intersection of life, art, and artisanry, with Rirkrit Tiravanija and Kythzia Barrera of Innovando la Tradición and Cooperativa 1050. My name's Madeleine Grynsztejn, and I'm the director of the Museum of Contemporary Art Chicago. So what am I doing here? Okay, I'll tell you. Well, first, along with my husband, Tom Shapiro, I'm a huge fan and supporter of the incredible organization Cooperativa 1050, the 1050 Collective, that Kythzia co-founded with her partner in life and love, Diego Mier y Terran. Cooperativa 1050 is a socially committed company serving artisan communities from the Mexican states of Oaxaca, Puebla, and Chiapas. And Cooperativa 1050 is dedicated to developing the conditions for these artisan communities' well-being, agency, and autonomy by bringing their ceramics to every corner of the world while putting artisans before profits. So you'll be hearing more about that from Kythzia. The second reason I'm here is that I'm an old acquaintance of Rirkrit Tiravanija. We went to school together in the early 1990s when we attended the Whitney Museum's Independent Study Program at the same time. I've been a huge fan of Rirkrit's work for many years as an art historian and a curator, acquired the work for museums and so on. Rirkrit is an internationally recognized artist, born in Argentina from Thailand family, lives in New York, Berlin, and Chiang Mai. He's exhibited his work since the early 1990s, and he's had major exhibitions at significant museums, including the Pompidou in Paris in 2012, the Tate Modern in 2013, the Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam in 2016, Museo Jumex in 2015, the National Gallery of Singapore in 2018, and many more. And I mentioned the National Gallery of Singapore specifically because I want to thank Rirkrit for joining us from Singapore, where it's 8 o'clock in the morning. He's not even had his cup of coffee. So thank you, RT. Another reason I'm here is that I love Monica Manzutto and Jose Curi's programs and persons at Kurimanzutto Gallery in Mexico City. So for all those reasons, I hope I will be a good guide for everyone here this evening who's joined us as we engage in a conversation that is centered on the exhibition Mezcal versus Pulque, which is currently on view at Kurimanzutto in Mexico City. And that show is a result of a years-long, deep and beautiful collaboration between Rirkrit, who's here with me when I look at the screen, and Kythzia, and a number of potters from Oaxaca who are affiliated with Cooperativa 1050. Kythzia is sitting inside the gallery space, the gallery exhibition. Before we begin, a few special thank yous. First, the three of us want to thank you, our public, for taking the time to join with us tonight in English. And in particular, we want to thank, the three of us want to thank the members of the Huajes Valley Network, a wonderful community of people who support Kythzia and Diego's incredible work through their umbrella institution called Innovando la Tradición, Innovating Tradition. When we speak with Kythzia, we will learn more about Innovando, which promotes fairer and more equitable practices for Mexico's pottery communities. I also want to express, all three of us want to express special gratitude to Kurimanzutto Gallery and especially the amazing Julia Villaseñor for being such a great collaborator tonight. And of course, tonight we honor our creators, not only Rirkrit, but also the potters who graciously agreed to collaborate with him, Margarita Cortes Cruz, Maricela Ortiz Cortes, Gregoria Cruz Peralta, Silvia Garcia Mateos, and Leopoldo Barranco. So with that, the three of us decided to split up this conversation into three parts. Part one, we're going to talk about the exhibition Mezcal versus Pulque. We're going to go on a little tour, show you images of the show. Part 2, we're going to take a little bit of a deep dive into Rirkrit's practice as it relates to this current exhibition and what has preceded in his work. And part 3 will pivot to the work of Colectivo and the work of Kythzia and Diego. And then perhaps the three of us can actually talk together about our mutual efforts to create progressive organizations in partnership with the people that we wish to serve. Okay, so that's it. So with that, let's go. So part 1, here's the slideshow. And what I am going to do is I'm going to invite Rirkrit to begin to take us, hi Grace, to begin to take us on a little tour of the show. So this is the result, Rirkrit, Kythzia, this is the result of a 2-year-long exchange between Rirkrit and a number of potters who are affiliated with 1050. Can the two of you, as we walk through these wonderful visuals, which begins with this tree branch in a bucket that is garlanded with little ceramic pictures, can you guys take us through how this collaboration first came to be? How did the idea germinate?
So really what happened was, I guess I received a copy of this book that the Colectivo had put together with all the different kind of potteries from Oaxaca, I guess, a book that shows all the pottery. And I got this book from Jose Curi, who knew that I was at that point working on and looking at and interested in, ceramics and things. And when I saw the book, I said to Jose, well, I think we should go to all the villages to see all the pottery with my dear friend Elena from Rosetta in Mexico City, the great friend and chef. And I said, let's go to all the villages and try to do a recipe book using all the pottery that is being made, So it's kind of like for me, it's like the perfect symbiosis of like what I'm interested in, in terms of actually using and use of objects, but then also like the idea of like learning and eating and cooking together. So that was my initial, I think, starting point. And then, of course, from there on, we got connected with Titia and Diego, and we had a discussion. And from there, I started to basically go to Oaxaca to visit. I'm not sure how on Kytzia's side, how did Jose?
Well, it was a very happy call that I received from Jose one day, asking if we were willing to get to know Rirkrit. And we were like, what? Of course. And so everything started with first a call just to get to know each other personally or virtually. And yeah, little by little, we were getting together, and finally the time came to receive you in Oaxaca. It was a very happy day, and everything was like by the end of the pandemic, so it was also complicated with the artisans and all the fear around what was going on in the world. But nevertheless, we overcome all those fears and logistics to make sure that we were all safe. And little by little, the visits to the artisans and the conversations and just the getting together as humans started. And it was, for me, it was a very, very beautiful moment to see how Rirkrit approach the artisans and the villages and with such a humble and respectful attitude that I've never seen someone approaching the villages with so much humbleness, and it was beautiful. And then, yeah, the magic happened. There was not really much to do, no Rirkrit. Like,
No,
Oh,
that was just being there. But
this is
like
the book
I remember
I
like
wanted
the
to
first,
show.
I remember
Yeah,
the first Zoom meeting with Diego and Kythzia. Of course, they were very careful about like the idea that someone is just showing up and coming and going to the villages and basically taking all the knowledge and running away with it. And I really respected that, and I thought that was quite important to be wary about really who you let in a way. I mean, also besides the pandemic, because of course they're elderly, and you wouldn't want just anyone to just show up, kind of thing. But also like to be careful about how, of course, as much as you want them to be, uh, seen and understood, it's also like that. Of course, often this kind of situation people can easily take advantage, and so I completely was so kind of really had a lot of good feeling about already their approach to like even how I would, even have a chance to come into this, um, you know, to even just visit really. So that was really an important aspect. And I think, I mean, and of course I couldn't say to them, well, I'm a very slow and slowly careful approaching person, but, it was a little, but so, I had to just kind of go and do it kind of thing.
yeah. The classic
yeah,
cultural appropriation was like the big elephant in the room when we were starting the project. No, that's something that we always, um, uh, yeah, we take care of every step and who comes in, and because we receive these kind of messages by email or phone calls really like every week, and it's not something that we do. You you have seen, it's not something that Colectivo does to work for artists. It's like really only Mariana Castillo and Rirkrit, and that's it. And so, yeah, the classic of going to the artisans and um, take everything out and don't give the credit. We didn't want to do anything like that. We wouldn't allow it. And but of course, you never know. So
yeah.
when the conversation started, it was little by little a great relief to realize this was not the case, and that it was
Yes,
going to be from a completely different place this time. No, so it was
yeah.
amazing. I
It's
enjoy it
true.
and love it. Yeah.
It's true. It's a very, very happy marriage of two of three people who really understand how to work in partnership and in community rather than extract from community.
Yeah.
I want to just touch base on one part of the show, which is the part that you're sitting in, Kythzia, and Julia, who's our fantastic choreographer here with the slides, can maybe bring us to the casita that you're sitting in, its exterior perhaps. And Rirkrit, could you talk to us a little bit about this reconstruction of what looks like a tile roof structure and what inspired it?
Yeah.
Here it is.
So this this casita, this structure was actually inspired by a walk we had to the top of the mountain one afternoon, and being guided up to see like this stone house. Oh, I guess we have images of it. Anyway, so this stone house is there, and we're talking about the possibility of maybe using it as a kind of place for people to come and stay whether they came to like learn how to make things or to be there. And so I saw this structure and I thought it would be great to make a project around idea of perhaps starting to restore it. So so that was like just up there in the mountain. And of course, when the time came around for the exhibition, I thought, well, I needed some kind of, in a way, a kind of center to like, yeah, just find different way to like how I could like actually utilize or to work with the things that we had made and what would make sense in that way. And what we see is actually, I mean, initially I had wanted to make tiles in Tonaltepec, which is a kind of red clay with the splatter, because that's where the stone building is, you know. And to use the technique of course, how they make the ceramics or pottery up there to make the tiles for the roof, which of course, actually, if you saw, I mean, as you saw some of the vessels, they have this kind of very painterly or very open kind of gesture to them. And so that was kind of my initial start. And I think we did try to do some research and experiment and see how it could be done. So, and anyway, at the same time, then we kind of found that we, you know, had to do something else. So we then, of course, went to the other village and decided to work with the kind of much more organized production there to make the tiles.
Yeah. It was
And
a
what
lot
we're
of work.
looking at is something that and what we're looking at is something that is a kind of 1/3 scale of the abandoned house that you saw in the stone house. And Kythzia, you see the door, and on the sort of 2/3 to the right, and Kythzia is sitting inside the casita. And I don't know, Kythzia, if you're able to have your camera person kind of.
Sure.
Oh, look at that! There's the interior image that Kythzia is sitting in.
Yeah. So I'm
Currently.
sitting in the corner of the place, but if there is this small hut where to start you have to go in and like make a reverence to go through the door because it's not so high, and then the only thing that you will see here it's sacred space with the bowls made by
And
the
these bowls
artisans.
are all the bowls from the artisans, right? From all of the
Yeah,
artisans. These are the bowls that they made.
exactly.
And
You
did they
will
make
see.
them in collaboration with Rirkrit, or is it that they made them and they are in Rirkrit's Casita?
Well, the casita was like the last thing Rirkrit decided to do, because at the beginning there was no plan, actually. Like the
Big
only plan was
surprise.
to, like spend some time together and see what will happen. And the conversation was about life and food and just watching them work. And then at some point, Rirkrit will say like, "Oh, that's a very interesting moment of your process. So let's leave that pot there." And that was it. We were just enjoying being together, producing like what the hands would make while we were having a conversation about the trees of peaches outside, or
Oh.
the clouds, or like family. And there was no really a plan, but what I loved was that when we decided the casita was something we could anchor the project for the gallery, and then when the artisans came and they went into the casita, inside the casita, and we were all here around this table, I don't know, Rirkrit, but it was a very, very emotional moment when they started to mention that it was like the house of their parents or their grandparents, and that they really feel they were in atmosphere where the clay and the earth, the soil, you could smell, feel, and have this feeling that you were in their villages. And this was the indication that Rirkrit made it, like he could make the translation, like, because for me it was about them having a relationship with the work that we were trying to bridge the two worlds. So if they would say, yes, this is a house where I feel like being back in the village, then it was like, yes, he made it. He made it possible. He made the bridge. And I
Oh,
hope all the visitors were also touched by that.
I mean, I think.
yes.
Sorry, I just and I think we see some images there, actually, of us cooking the day. I mean, really the week of the installation, and with Goya, who there she is, and with her pottery, which is kind of like where I initially thought that's how I was going to approach it. And of course, like one thing when you go to visit, generally we always somehow start with kind of cooking and eating. They would be making some breakfast, and then we would just kind of sit around and eat
Yeah.
together. And then actually at some moment in time, Kythzia would say, ask some questions, like, start to ask him why he's here, kind of thing. And I thought that was a really good. I mean, on the one hand, I mean, it's kind of like an important part, but also I think for the artisans to feel like that they are like kind of they are actually the person kind of in control of the situation, And of course, I had to answer and to reason and to think why I was there and doing things there, And I think that was like a really good process to have to like explain why I would be there and what I was going to do with it, which is, I think, not really something that happens often, like in situations like that, right? And I think already when I was taking the trip down, I already thought, well, I'm going to go and spend a bit of time first before I even think about really what this could be, or what will come out of it. And I think for us, it wasn't like that there was a kind of goal or aim. We had a vague idea that maybe I would make an exhibition, and I wanted to say also the Casita is a structure which, of course, in a way, in the past numbers of years, I've been making tea rooms with a friend of mine.
Right.
So I made that tea room which a friend of mine would perform in, because she's a performance artist who's been working with tea, and so somehow that was also kind of part of my interest in terms of like making vessels or using vessels. And so in that sense, there is a kind of, something already in the background that could be used as a kind of ground towards how really I would approach, really, I would say, like the access to the hands of the artisan, right? Because really when you come and you're in this space, or when you look at these objects or these, these bowls, you can only feel them by holding them,
Yeah.
And when you hold them, you really feel the hand that has made them, And that's, I think, for me, a really kind of an important aspect of like what I wanted it to be like, and in a way, the reasons to use the two drinks. It was a part of like, of course, finding a way to make a condition where things have to be used,
Right. You're referring to, I believe, the kind of opening night, and here's Kythzia serving. And I believe that I wish I'd been there. I believe the opening night, you, Rirkrit, served Mezcal on one end of the table, and Titia served Pulque, two traditional Mexican beverages derived from the same maguey plant, which grows primarily in the state of Oaxaca. And they're ritual altering drinks. They are mind altering drinks. They're just plain great drinks during the opening of the show. And that is something that here again is another way in which the two of you and your purpose in this, as you walk through this world, are very, very well matched.
Yes.
Both in terms of Rirkrit's lifelong, 30-year-long artistic practice and Kythzia and Diego's devotion to making clay come alive. Kythzia.
Completely. I think that I think that's why it was so like fortunate, the way everything happened and evolved into this amazing space, because I think both of us, like Rirkrit through his art and us, Diego and me as designers, we are using design or our practice to really bridge these two worlds and make visible what we feel it's lacking in this other part of the bridge in the modern industrial world. And I think both of us have that at the center of our practice, and is something that we discover and we made very tangible during our conversations and during the exhibition, the moment in which we were serving and, like asking people to hold this in their hands. It really felt like a sacred ritual or sacred moment. And there's so much to talk about that, and it's a very sort of deep for me, and I know for Rirkrit too. It's not just objects, but there's like a set of relations that are here in the way people live, the way people understand clay, and they relate to work, to time, to their family, their community, their territory. Like, there's so much clay can teach. And
Yes.
yeah.
I love that. I want to pick up on what you just said, which is that I feel that both of you, in your different and beautiful practices, are committed to a set of relations. You just said that, and that really, for me, if we could do a little of part two, segues very, very nicely for those art historical eggheads who have joined us to talk a little about, and then we'll come back to Colectivo to talk a little bit about Rirkrit's practice in light of what we're looking at, Rirkrit, because this is such a marvelous and yet incredibly organic outcome of nearly 30 years of your trajectory. And I'm thinking in particular of a story, if you could tell us, a little version of this story that I know about you, which is that even as a student, two things have been present since the beginning that are front and center in this show that I observe. And the first is pottery, and the second is how you subvert the institutional context of that pottery because it's encumbering lived experience. And I'm thinking of your undergraduate work. Could you tell us a little bit so that we can connect it to the fact of what we're actually seeing in these images?
Yeah. Well, like go back to the beginning of the world. No, so, I think, of course, as many audience, if you knew my work, that I've kind of been in the art world, kind of somehow put into the I've become like a kind of bracketed as a kind of the cook in the art world, and then so I just want to say that, and it's not as if like it came out really from the interest of food, but really of the interest of, in a way, when I was at the Art Institute of Chicago, I was as a student. I was walking around in the museum, and it's of course it's an encyclopedic museum, and it has a kind of a number of collection which is in the Asian wing, which is a great amount of like collection of Thai kind of crafts, ceramics and potteries and Buddhas. And and at that point, I mean, as a young artist, I mean, I was like just questioning, I mean, and with a lot of other things in the background, that was going on, I guess, in the question of art, that that all this was being kept and stored and
Right.
looked at and displayed, and of course within the context of kind of Western, kind of understanding or way of understanding this other culture or other places or other cultures in that sense. And I felt like suddenly I just realized that with this kind of idea that that there was a kind of complete gap in terms of really what I saw and how it was being shown in relationship to like how these objects were actually in reality in life used and in a way a use and live structure with that. So I thought,
Exactly.
yeah, at that moment I said to myself, okay, how am I going to like smash this glass case open and take all these things out? um, and actually a simple analogy I have, which later on I developed, was the fact that I was a question actually from Nicola Borio, who later wrote a book. But we had an interview, and I said to him, I just kind of said, what I'm doing is basically taking Marcel Duchamp's urinal, reinstalling it onto the wall, and pissing into it.
I love that.
It's a kind of extreme image, but that's what it is. I'm basically taking the ready-made and then like just using it, right? But not
Yeah.
using it like in just any way, but using it in a sense because I'm doing that action, let's say on Marcel, that there is a kind of cultural construction that shifts, right?
Right.
Because I'm coming from a completely different place, and I have my interest to piss into this thing for different reasons, So, I mean, that's a very basic and very simple way of putting it together. And actually, I was explaining to some group of students when I was actually showing them that I've been to Oaxaca. I said, and now I've kind of come full circle, to where I started, in a sense that now I'm making these vessels. I'm actually making pottery. I'm back to actually from the beginning point, in a sense. But then how do I deal with the fact that, of course, they're going to take it and put it into the museum of, Art Institute and put it inside a glass case and then cut it off from its actual, process and life and being, So, and that's an ongoing struggle in terms of like, how I try to find my way in between and work,
Yeah. Well, that's where your relationship with Kythzia and Colectivo becomes all the more logical to me, because they are, a social justice company, and those pots go out into the world. They don't go into vitrines. They're for sale through a fair trade system that is established by 1050, that counters the traditional exploitative market relationship to indigenous potter communities. So it is, but that's a really interesting, I hadn't thought about that paradox and problematic of these things being reappropriated as works of art. So both you and Kythzia are fighting that battle in parallel. I also loved what you said, about the use of these pots, and again, reminding our friends who are joining us tonight that the opening of Kurimanzutto's show served Pulque and Mezcal. That ties into a long-standing element in your work, that of social engagement through generous hospitality. You mentioned Nicholas Bourriot, and again, for the art history wonks, we would be remiss not to mention that you are a pioneer of a particular way of making art that he titled relational aesthetics, that came to the fore in the early 90s, late 90s, early 2000s, of which you are a tremendous influence. And that particular work really, you're so important in delivering it to the world, which is one of, it's a beautiful moment in art history that focuses on moments of sociability as opposed to objects as the product. In fact, one of my favorite things about you is that you're quite well known for using the words lots of people as one of your media. It's not paint on canvas, and I love that. That says everything. So, very focused on social interactions that blur the boundaries between art and life. You said that, that way art becomes life and life becomes art. And Kythzia and Diego are all about that too. So it makes so much sense, right, Kythzia? So let's talk about Colectivo, 1050 and Innovación la Tradición. You wrote the most beautiful essay. I think maybe it would take 5 minutes to read. What do you think? Or do you want to talk it through?
I wrote it because I knew I was going to be so nervous now.
You're not nervous.
I just wanted to have it out of my mind. And if you want to read it, I think it's easier for me because in English I will be a bit clumsy.
Oh, you want me to read it?
I think so. I don't have it now.
I don't have it.
Okay. So I think that there's something about what you said, the paradox between the bridge we are trying to make, as you all saw, the context where the artisan villages are, the artisans live, and the set of values that are important for them and that create their world is very different. And the work that we do at Innovando, and as you can see in the images, is all about bringing together the artisans so that they realize how powerful is the way they are, how strong they are, how much they know, and how important it is for the world to really get answers for the most pressing problems that I feel we have in the cities or in the modern world. And some of those things have to do with economics, and as you were saying, like we even have to say social justice, or like fair trade. And even having to name that, it's because there is a problem and in the way this world works. So
and again, this is a place where you and Rirkrit very much meet, because I believe that both of you are committed to a kind of utopian concept, and by that I don't mean something that's unattainable at all, because you're doing Colectivo 1050. Rirkrit in 1998 founded the Land Foundation, which Tom and I have visited in Chiang Mai with his friend Camille Larcha-Praset. And that is a beautiful experiment in ethical land use and sustainability, and it is centered on a table. You arrive and it is centered on a table. And look at you, Kythzia. Look at your work. And this is really a move away from an organizational move away from, white savior charity, from extractive principles. Both of you are working with varieties of post-colonial critique that are, for me, just, the future and the present, like you are the society we wish to be.
Totally. I think like what I've learned from these 20 years walking in the pottery villages in Oaxaca are really amazing values that I now maybe can name, but at the beginning I didn't know how to call them and why I was attracted to them. And now philosophers in economy call it relocation or something like that, relocalization. But it is actually about learning. What I've learned is how to live in community, how to live in like as humans, really, like how to, when I see the artisans making clay without any interface, let's say, it really brings me to the idea or the feeling that we lost how to be humans, just like the way they touch clay and they have a relationship through the body with the reality, with all their senses in their fingers. And it's like, it's incredible to see how they relate to the material and to their own body. And touching soil in that way is really connecting to a way of being human that I aspire to be like them, and one day be able to reconnect with the world in the way they do, not only with their own body but also with their relation to nature, to the village, to their family. And it is something that we lost so much in the cities. Like right now we are having this conversation and virtually, and has nothing to do with the way they would relate to a person, no? So
Yes, you're right. I recovered, Kythzia, your little talk, and I can give a very reduced for our friends. I think it would be nice to hear from Kythzia. So pretend I'm Kythzia, and I will say a few things here. It's so beautiful. So Kythzia says, the potter's way of life has taught me to cultivate three virtues: peaceful coexistence, convivir en comunidad, in hope, not expectation, and with austerity, not scarcity. Pottery teaches me how to recover the horizon of coexistence in community. It has to do with living through and with the body, the know-how of making things with your own hands, the capacity of relating to reality through the senses, connecting with people with real sensations, and not from abstract or virtual experiences like this one. Austerity understood as a virtue that allows subsistence by taking care of life and common goods. Subsistence is not survival. It is not scarcity. It is not poverty. It is sufficiency. It is self-sufficiency, because potters and people in the villages make their own houses, their own clothes, their own tools, and eat the food they grow themselves. Hope is an active will, a social force that knows how to wait. Hope is not passive, and I don't mean a desire to achieve. It is not a demand. The production process of clay involves a lot of waiting, a lot of loss of time for some people, patience for others. Developing the capacity to know how to wait, how to endure, is a great asset in times of adversity. Clay has taught me a deep sense of human proportion. We have lost our way in modernizing life, and the world has been reduced to an experience of life that is a system experienced through screens, windows. We say, lose your ground, perder el piso. And this returns us to the primordial ground of our body. Clay demands for you to be present, to be centered. There is no interface at all. It's only a chunk of mud. And if you take that realization of being grounded and embodied in life, if you take that to the next level, then the bonds work with time and space and other people and family and community. I'm going to stop there because that is just so beautiful. And when I read that and I think about you and Rirkrit, I think about the word both. Both Rirkrit and Innovando design relationships, create the condition for relationships. Both Rirkrit and Innovando recover humanity and community. Both Rirkrit and Innovando create bridges between the handmade and the modern world. Both Innovando and Rirkrit believe in the staying power of traditional crafts. Both of you ask, how does the world of pottery be a platform to establish human engagement and non-exploitative relationships based on trust and respect and curiosity? And how do I hold space for collective creativity? You're talking, both of you, about a way of living, right?
Yeah. And I wouldn't say it's something that it's romantic. I mean, it's possible and it's hard. Of course, it's hard. It's not something easy because the world pushes you to go the other way all the time.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Rirkrit, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I of course, I think, we forget that, it takes like a day to walk up the mountain to dig the clay and put it on the back of the donkey and then come back, you know, and then to process the clay and to then make a cup, and the cup isn't, in a way, is not in this situation or many situations. They're not given the value they have really been, that invested with life, and I think that's something I really, I think if we have the experience or have been, for me, I've been touched by that, and I think it's very important to then understand. I think that idea of like the social force has to know how to wait, or like has to know how to take its time. I think that's, just simply understanding that this is a life's
Yeah.
work and living thing, and that we need to give it value and time, and not just kind of it's not just another thing we use to survive, like even to just drink or eat from. It's actually there is much more behind it than that, and if we understand or think and give it time to think about that, we will come to this place.
Yeah.
Come to a place where we can live, with the others, with understanding, and with
Yeah.
kind of which I think is like even more so important now, than ever.
Totally. And I think also in like for Diego and for me, what it's also very important is to make sure that we are honoring the effort of the families that we work with for taking care of this knowledge and this wisdom and this way of living, because we are talking about a 4,000-year tradition that has been passed on orally from mother to daughter without interruptions. And so how can you rush when you are in front of this? How can you think that you may know better or do better or have something more important than taking care of it? So that's what is also one of invisible part of the project is to have these challenges and these paradoxes of the global economy and the recognition of the value of this way of thinking, way of living, way of understanding the world in the center of the project. And that's something that you might not see in the pots, in the exhibition, but it's present for Rirkrit, for the artisans, and for us. This is one of the goals of the project, to make sure that we can embrace this paradox and communicate it in a way that people can also see that. And I think that's why I think this little hut is so well done and complete, because it really brings that to your senses and when you come in.
I landed deliberately on this page because I said there were 3 parts to this talk, but there's actually a 4th, which is my shameless pitch for Innovando and 1050. Rirkrit joins me, I'm sure, that this is a community of visionaries who support activities to make sure pottery and the way of living with pottery prevails. And please join us in this quest to support our community of allies. And you're absolutely right, Kythzia. One of the things that, again, where you all meet and where, if I may be so bold, the MCA meets you, is that one of the great learnings that this generation, our generation and younger and better, are doing is, there's a line that we live by, which is, nothing about us without us, right? And in your own, each in your own way, have been producing that philosophy, for which all of us who are in this Facebook are so deeply grateful and deeply happy and deeply and happily influenced by. We actually have a few minutes for questions, and I think the amazing Julia Villaseñor, who's been running our slides, might have some to share with us. I got one by text, and I don't even know who this is, so someone has got the question for you is, can you talk about any sense of spirituality or faith that might be connected to either of your works?
I thought we were talking about that the whole time.
Yeah, that's a great answer. That's a great answer. Julia, the amazing Villaseñor, if you have other questions or observations, I know that people have been saying hello. Thank you so much. It means so much to us that you guys joined us. And with about 3 minutes to go, I'm happy to open the floor, but I don't see any questions in the chat. So I'm depending and leaning on Julia. And also, Julia can jump in if you want. Okay.
No questions. We can also give some time to people.
Yeah, hi, that's me. Thank you. Yes, we're open for questions. Let me just see. So there's a comment that I'm going to place here. Madeleine, you can read it on the screen.
Rirkrit, what influences you when in the process or relationship is right? What influences you when you know that a process or a relationship is right to start having a plan? Because you mentioned that in the beginning there was no plan. Tom will say.
I mean, for me, it's always never having a plan ever. Because I think, to feel things or to be in things, you can't really plan them. I mean, I would say, to have a relation is not to have any expectation or not to have any kind of goal within it, and in that sense, yeah, there is never a plan. I just would say, and I don't think there's a beginning or an end, so that's why it doesn't need a plan, right? I mean, we come to a point where we have put some things out and we've kind of looked at things, but I think it's only really just a part of, process. And I would just say that's just part of life, because we have just kind of come to a moment where we could look at something. But I would say there's no plan. We just keep going. I hope to continue to keep going back, and I hope to meet more artisans and go to different places and have more time. I mean, so really, maybe if there was any plan, would be to have more time.
Oh,
Exactly.
that's beautiful.
Exactly.
That's beautiful. I love that. And, Kythzia was saying that, this tradition is 4,000 years old. And then I'm reading her little text again, and it says, it's 4,000 years old. Clay is radical. In Spanish, radical comes from raíz. Clay is rooted. It is a deep knowledge that honors a way of living and wisdom. So it is both like super now, and it's 4,000 years old.
Yeah.
Marty is asking, Rirkrit, can you address the newspaper pieces in the exhibition?
So the newspaper pieces are really maybe my only real contribution to the show or something. It's really like the title of the show for me, and it is, and actually we didn't really speak about that, but I think, of course, Pulque and Mezcal, I mean, in their process, one is a fermented, kind of beverage or elixir, and of course the Mezcal is of course a distill, and there are two different techniques, two different ways of looking at and spending time actually in life, right? And so one painting, one of these newspaper, and then of course I use the newspaper because it has to do with that moment and that day and that time and what's going on in the world. But to not forget that yes, there's other layers in life that's going on continuously. But anyway, one is made with pulque and clay and ash, and the other is made with mezcal. But yes, that's.
And also, Marnie, these paintings to me also tie into another long-standing output of Rirkrit's, which is related to protest work and these incredible drawings that you have, that you sometimes include in your shows that are made by you and also by others. And one of these paintings is covered by a newspaper, La Jornada from Oaxaca. One is dated January 10th, and the whole newspaper is there, and the other is February 16th. And one shows an active volcano, and the other shows a polluted beach, I think, in Thailand, Rirkrit, where your family is from, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we're a little bit past 8. I know that all of us who we can't see and who we can see want to thank Kythzia Barrera and Rirkrit Tiravanija for this incredible, beautiful collaboration that most importantly has resulted in uplifting, elevating, and making more visible the extraordinary artisans in Oaxaca who are still carrying on a 4,000-year-old tradition that is as urgent, as beautiful, as topical as ever today. With that, I sincerely thank you for letting me be part of this conversation. You guys are both deeply, deeply, deeply important to our world. Please walk your walk, because we need you. And with that, I think Julia is going to close us out. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I hope you learned and enjoyed. And I hope you check out Colectivo 1050. And I hope you always check out Rirkrit at Barbara Gladstone Gallery, other places. And I hope you always check out UMC Chicago. Why not? All right. So thank you both. Buenas noches. Good night.
Gracias, Madeleine.
Adios. Adios.